Hi, my name is Ola and I'm currently doing a PhD funded through the National Institute for Health and Care Research, Manchester Biomedical Research Centre, and I am so excited today to be interviewing Professor Sandra Bucci, hopefully to inspire you to pursue a career in research. Hi Sandra, how are you today?
Hi, good, thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a National Institute for Health and Care research professor in digital mental health, and I'm a professor of clinical psychology here at the University of Manchester. And I'm also a clinical psychologist by background, so I'm an honorary consultant clinical psychologist at Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust, and co-director of the Complex Trauma and Resilience Research Unit at Greater Manchester Mental Health NHS Foundation Trust. And basically, in terms of my role, I lead a large program of research in the area of digital mental health, with a particular focus on working with people who experience severe mental health problems. I'm also co-founder of Care Loop Health, which is a spin-out from the University of Manchester.
So Sandra, what's your role in the Manchester BRC?
So I co-lead the digital sub-theme, which sits within the mental health theme of the Manchester BRC.
As part of International Women's Day, we are celebrating successful women researchers like Sandra. How does it feel to be one of the top 30 women in science and to hold such a prestigious NIHR Professor Fellowship?
Well, it's a fantastic honour. I think it's especially important for visibility for women, not just in STEM, but across science. And being successfully awarded the research professorship was a real highlight. It was the first awarded at Manchester, so it was a great achievement, not just personally, but also for our faculty at Manchester, in particular for mental health at Manchester, because I feel the success of the award was the result of some fantastic mentorship that I've had, collaboration and supportive networks that I've had. It also felt very validating of the work that we've been doing in mental health at Manchester. And it really feels like a responsibility, not only to have an impact, but also to pay it forward, to help others navigate their own path, encourage more women to apply for prestigious fellowships and awards, and for keep pushing forward.
Sandra, I'm sure you've had many proud moments in your career. What has been your proudest moment?
I guess there's not really been a single moment, but more a collection of moments that have been both big and small. So in terms of the big milestones, I guess being awarded the research professorship or being recognised as doing impactful work in science and securing grant funding and some big grant funding means I can do some cutting edge research. You know, they're the obvious moments, but they're not the only moments that are important to recognise. Some of my proudest moments have been much quieter. So that may be, for example, seeing one of my mentees or a junior researcher gain confidence. That's been incredibly rewarding. Or seeing a project go from an idea through to applying for the grant funding, securing the funding, to seeing my research team in their flow, and through to hosting, interdisciplinary events or events to showcase the work. And getting the work into clinical practice has been really rewarding. And I suppose I've also had proud moments when I felt I've overcome challenges or when I didn't give up. So, for example, if I've had to fight for grant funding or overcome challenges in recruitment if I've been doing a study, there've been other moments that I felt proud of.
What's helped you progress in your career?
I think it's been a combination of strategic approaches and peer support and mentor networks and perhaps personal qualities that have helped. So being proactive is one. I've put myself forward for opportunities. So whether that be applying for a fellowship or leading a grant or taking on a role or, even speaking at a conference, it's made me step outside of my comfort zone. And those opportunities have then built on each other. Another thing that's helped me progress, I think, has been mentorship I really wouldn't have progressed in my career without some good mentorship. And I started this early. So my first boss, actually many years ago now, is still one of my mentors, and my current mentors are brilliant. They challenge me, they have a critical ear, they can be a critical friend, and they offer advice and have offered advice at important times in my career. But I've also had some very good sponsors, and sponsorship is a bit different to mentorship. So this is someone who actively champions you, who puts your name forward for opportunities and helps you get to the next level. And some women who've been a sponsor and recommended me for promotions, or whether that be leadership roles, have been immensely helpful. Also, collaboration. You know, science is not an individual effort. I've built some very strong and long-lasting collaborations, and I can honestly say aligning yourself with people as a research group, you are better together rather than seeing yourself necessarily in competition with your peers. You just have a greater capacity for impact as a group rather than being you're viewing yourself as an individual researcher. And I've been really fortunate in mental health at Manchester for the network that we have cultivated. And in terms of personal qualities, I think being resilient and being adaptable have helped. A career in research has highs and lows. Grants get rejected, your experiments might fail, and progress can feel very slow. So setbacks are part of the process, and actually they can be an important time in shaping the work and where it goes next. And being adaptable, I think, is also important in science. My research now is in a very different place to where I started, and that's, I think, because I've adapted to a changing landscape, certainly in the area of healthcare that I work in. So I've shifted, focused, and embraced new methodologies and worked outside of my discipline, and I think that's been crucial in being able to progress my research. And I think having passion and energy to make a difference has been a really powerful driver. And I think that stems from my upbringing. So I've come from an immigrant family where my parents were migrated from Europe to Australia after the Second World War. And actually the sort of values that instilled in me has profoundly shaped my work and my purpose. So I saw firsthand the struggles that came with building something from the ground up, and that's instilled in me a strong sense of responsibility to help others. And I think when you see hardship, it makes you value perseverance and hard work, and how actually the power of education and research can change lives. So knowing what motivates you and drives you and having a clear purpose, I think is really important, especially when you're faced with challenges.
Thanks, Sandra. The points on resilience and your upbringing really resonate with me. From sort of my upbringing, I also come from an immigrant family. My parents, they immigrated from Sudan to the UK to work here, and their hard work has really instilled sort of my sort of ethos with hard working, and that you sort of try, even if you fall, you try again. And so I can really resonate with that. And then in terms of resilience, I feel like that is my ethos. I am somebody who has chronic health problems, and I've never let that stop me. But that's really built up my resilience in terms of my personal life, but also in terms of my working life. So I'm sure, Sandra, you've had lots of challenges and drawbacks in your career. Anything that comes to mind that's hindered your career?
Yeah, I think there's been some structural and some personal. So self-doubt has been one of them. There's times where I've wondered, am I really good enough, or am I really ready enough to apply for a fellowship or lead a project or step into a leadership role? But I think it's important to emphasise that this is common, especially for women and especially for women from underrepresented groups. But to overcome this, I have had to intentionally challenge these doubts and get some good mentorship around this, reminding myself that if I don't go for this, I won't help people through my research. And actually that's worse than putting myself forward for things and, risking being unsuccessful. Another thing has been balancing career progression with other responsibilities. So an academic career and a clinical academic career can be demanding. There's research, there's teaching, there's leadership roles, there can be clinical work, and there's personal life, of course, and that can be a difficult balance. And academia, I think, rewards overwork. The job never feels done. And so early on in my career, I wanted to be part of everything, and that can easily implode if you don't keep an eye on things or have some boundaries. So I learnt to set boundaries and prioritize what really aligns with your goals and the goals of the work, and trying not to feel guilty have been important lessons. And the competitive nature of funding and applying for fellowships and grants. So the funding landscape is competitive, and if your research isn't prioritised for funding, it can really feel like a setback, and it can actually hinder your progression and the progression of the work. So I just think it's important to remember that you're on a journey, and to reframe any setbacks you might have as part of the process, and use the feedback that you get to refine your ideas and try again.
I can really relate to your point about self-doubt. I think that's one of the things that I really struggle with is, having imposter syndrome and sort of feeling that I'm not worthy or not good enough for sort of a career in research. But I'm sort of working through that, and I'm sort of really proud of myself to be doing a PhD and hopefully inspire other women and inspire hopefully other mums that they can do this. How would you say you've navigated your struggles and twists in your career path?
I've drawn strength from my background. So, I've mentioned that my parents emigrated from Europe to Australia after World War II and had many challenges, and they started from having nothing really, and they built their lives from there. They weren't formally educated, they didn't speak the language, and they had to develop a level of resilience and toughness and perseverance to make something of their lives. And I think those qualities were really instilled in me and my siblings. So having a level of resilience and determination and perseverance and not giving up can really be applied, I think, to a research context. And I think it's probably given me a deep-rooted drive to keep going. When I'm faced with a challenge, I remind myself of the bigger picture, and that really helps in those challenging times.
I sort of loved your answers. Your parents must be so proud of you. I really feel like being adaptable and flexible has really helped me. And every time I've spoken to a successful researcher, they've always had such an interesting path to where they sort of are now. So I started my life doing pathology and then pediatrics and now clinical genetics, and now doing a PhD in genetics. And I've had a PhD opportunities early on in my career that were that I couldn't take or weren't given to me, which made me upset at the time, but I kind of feel like my career path has changed. So I'm really happy that everything sort of turned out to where I am today.
Yeah, so you've also had a winding journey.
So talking about mentorship, how do you feel is the best way to sort of get a mentor? Should it be somebody that's working with you, somebody else, more for a more pastoral role? How would you go about it?
Okay, great question. I've had multiple mentors who've served different purposes at different times. So earlier on in my career, I think I selected mentors who I felt were maybe in a similar place to me, and I wanted more advice on how to navigate certain aspects of my career from women in particular who I felt had been through a similar thing. So I was really looking for that alignment and that advice. And now actually I have asked for mentorship from people outside of my discipline, or from people who may have had different experiences to be more challenging. So, now from mentorship, I look more for challenge rather than alignment necessarily, although that is always important to have. So I think it depends on what you need at the time, and then you look for mentors who maybe can align with your context and the timing of your career. And you don't just have to have one mentor. You can have different mentors for different things, so that they can serve a different purpose.
I think you may have found yourself a new mentee. So hindsight is 2020. Sandra, what do you feel, advice-wise, would you give your younger self?
So 3 things. The first is that you belong in the room, because you'll have moments where you feel that you don't fit in, or that you have to work harder maybe than others to be taken seriously or to be heard. But your background and your experience and your perspectives are your strengths. And I would have liked to have realised that as my younger self, I think. The second thing is to apply for that opportunity, even if you think you may not be quite ready. You know, women often wait until they feel like they're perfectly qualified or their idea is perfectly formed, and you could miss an opportunity that could be really transformative. So take the leap and you'll work it out when you're there. And the third thing is that there's time, that you don't have to have everything figured out. And I think I probably thought I did as I looked around me and thought everyone else has this figured out. And as I've gotten older, I've realised that isn't the case.
I sort of really resonated with sort of your opportunity, taking opportunities. So I applied for this PhD actually when I was on maternity leave, sort of in the depth of sort of postpartum depression after a really complicated birth. And actually, I'm so proud of myself for pushing myself, because I wouldn't be here today doing this amazing PRC PhD.
Gosh, well done. That must have been a really difficult time.
It was really difficult, but I almost felt like it was like a turning point in my life personally and in my career, because it really gave me sort of self-belief that I could sort of fight or do anything.
And where do you feel that's come from?
I think that's really come from what you were talking about, your upbringing, sort of my parents sort of working hard to educate me and my siblings, and to also provide for their family back home in Sudan, which is quite common in Sudanese community, where you sort of have to send money back home to help people. So they've always had a really hard work ethic, and they've always pushed me to be my best. I also feel like my personal struggles with my own chronic health problems have always pushed me to seek help. I'm very good at saying help me. I've been in counselling, I've done therapy, but I've also realised how much I've overcome. And it hasn't been since I've sort of taken a step back and looked at how much I've overcome, sort of realised that actually I can do anything that I put my mind to.
Amazing.
What top tips would you give to early career colleagues like me to help us sort of navigate our career paths?
Okay, well, firstly, I would say don't be afraid to put yourself forward. Many of us hesitate, thinking that we need to be more ready before applying for that fellowship or applying for that award. So don't be afraid to put yourself forward. You can probably tell, I think, the power of mentorship and sponsorship is really important. So find mentors and build a strong support network. That's crucial. I'd also say don't get stuck in an echo chamber. Find people that challenge you and your ideas and your way of thinking, because it will make the work better. And learn to manage what you might perceive to be rejection. So, develop that resilience is a valuable skill in a research or a clinical or an academic career. So I would say to, learn to reflect and to push forward following that reflection. And be proactive and intentional. So don't wait for opportunities necessarily. Let people know what you want and where you want your work to go, and what you can offer. And lastly, I would say to keep purpose at the centre of what you do. So remind yourself why you started, what you started, because you're going to need that, especially when you face challenges.
I absolutely love that. And one of the things that you were talking about was sort of like challenges or drawbacks. And I always say, after every setback, there comes a comeback. What top tips would you give to early career colleagues to ensure that their work is recognised and rewarded?
Yeah, I think this can feel an uncomfortable one sometimes, especially for women, I think. So I guess one tip is to share your success on and the impact of the work and the impact that you've made where you can. So speak up about your research, whether that be in a meeting or at a conference or, going up to speak to somebody, share that success or the impact if you don't feel comfortable necessarily with sharing a success. Another tip is to apply for awards and apply for fellowships regularly, even if you don't get it. The process of applying actually helps you articulate your impact, which will make you better prepared next time. Build a strong network and actively engage in your research community. So go to events if you can, engage with your senior colleagues or societies, and try and be visible in your community in whatever way that you can. I would also say yes to presenting your work. So if you're given an opportunity to speak or present, take it. And I think an important one is to collaborate with the right people, and that can take time to find, but this includes people who, they may not necessarily be the most well-known person in a field, but I think it's important early on to collaborate with people who will elevate you and give you the time that you need to help you develop. And lastly, I would say is to try and be that person who lifts others up, because as you lift others up, they'll be inclined to lift you up, and that's how you build a network and a supportive network which will help sustain you over what can be a long career.
I absolutely love that. I just feel like positive energy, positive vibes, especially in a research team, is so important, because we all lead really busy, complicated lives. So any sort of uplifting energy is always welcomed.
Yeah, and especially in those tough times, I think.
So I would love to take a role in the future, in leadership. But why, Sandra, do you think women are underrepresented at senior leadership levels in research?
I think that's been a complex mix of historical, structural, and cultural factors. So sometimes senior leadership roles can be filled through informal networks, and where senior leadership roles have historically been filled more by men, women have had less access to sponsorship and mentorship and being put forward or encouraged to go for senior leadership roles. I think career interruptions has been a challenge. So where women have had childcare or other caring responsibilities, that's been one of the challenge areas. And I think in our field, maybe there's been fewer role models. So when you don't see people like you necessarily in positions, you might be less likely to aspire to those positions or see how to make it work and how it can be made to work. And I think there's something about gendered expectations, traits that are associated with strong leadership for men perhaps can be viewed more negatively for women. So, for example, being ambitious can be viewed perhaps more negatively for women who might be perceived as aggressive or confrontational.
What sort of changes in current practice or the culture do you think is needed to make a difference to women's equality in research?
Well, a couple of things. I actually think we need to have men advocate for women. Often it's women being sent on women's leadership programs, and there's all women in the room, and we're talking about things that are just wider than the people who are necessarily in the room. So I think it's actually important we have different people advocating for women. It's not just a women's issue. I think there are structural and cultural changes at institutional levels that are needed. So, it's fixing a system rather than fixing women as a message, I think is really important. And that may include things like transparent promotion criteria, flexible work policies that are without penalties, and perhaps broader metrics of success, particularly in research and academia. They can be quite limited. That's rooted in that historical context, I think, of what it means to be successful in academia. So I think some broader success metrics and criteria are important.
I really like the part when you said it's not just a woman's problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting. I feel like in my career, a lot of the people that have believed in me have been my male colleagues that have pushed me and seen my inner greatness, which I have never seen. So I definitely think there needs to be a culture change, and to sort of really promote equality in research for women.
It's also about what we're striving for is equality, diversity and inclusion for everybody, irrespective of gender or sexuality or ethnicity or class. It's about having better representation in all areas.
I completely agree. I've absolutely loved talking to you, Sandra. I could talk to you all day. I hope this is going to be inspiring and hopefully giving people sort of a deeper dive into the wonderful mind of Sandra Bucci.
Thank you.